Around this time last year, I released a video comparing Fujifilm 400 with Fujifilm Superia 400, and I didn't really have the nicest things to say about Superia 400. But I'll admit that I was wrong about the film. In this video, I want to show you every single image that I took on my very last roll of Superia 400. This video is a bit bittersweet because back in April, Fujifilm announced that Superia 400 is no longer going to be made. It was officially announced that it's discontinued, and once stock is up, that's it. They're not going to be making any more. And while, like I mentioned, I haven't had the nicest things to say regarding this film stock in the past, it is sad that it's no longer going to be produced because while it wasn't my favorite film stock, I know that there are a lot of photographers that really enjoyed this film. But like the title of this video suggests, and like I just said, I was wrong about this film stock because the results that I got from my very last roll really blew me away. All of the photos on this roll were taken over the course of about a day and a half. My family and I drove up to Colorado to visit my brother for his birthday, and that's where all of these photos were taken. I loaded the film into this camera right here. This is my beautiful Leica M2. And I think this is a statement that only photographers will understand, but I absolutely love this freaking camera. And the lens that I have on here is the Contax G 35mm f2 for the Contax G1 and G2 camera systems. And the other camera that I use, for those that might be interested, is the Fujifilm GFX50S2, and on it I have the Tokina 100mm macro, or it's the 100mm f2.8 macro, and this is what I use to scan all of the film. So I loaded the M2, and then we drove to a breakfast place called Joe Mama's. I wish I was making that up, but that was actually the name of the restaurant, and it was so good we actually went twice. But as you can see from this image, there's a lot of damage to this particular photo. And when I picked up the negatives from the lab, I actually didn't notice the damage at first, and it wasn't until I was scanning the film that I noticed these weird bubbles on the actual negatives themselves. Since I never really got along with this film stock, this particular roll was sitting in my fridge for, I would say, at minimum a couple years, and I moved, and then at one point I forgot to plug my fridge back in because I was filming a video, and it was loud, and so yeah, it seems like at some point moisture got into the film. I obviously couldn't see that, and yeah, so we have a very damaged roll of film. The first 27 photos have some sort of damage on it. The next 11, I was able to squeeze 38 images from this roll, but the next 11 photos are just fine. They actually look really good. And the last part of this roll was actually my favorite part, so I'm really glad that that was the part that wasn't damaged. But yeah, so you'll see a varying amount of damage. Some of it is pretty minor, and some of it is, you know, pretty serious. But yeah, after the breakfast place, we drove up to Boulder, Colorado. It was kind of raining a little bit, so we weren't able to go around and hike like we wanted to. But what we still did is we just explored downtown. We went shopping, went to a bookstore, got some coffee. And this is why I want to say that I feel like I was unfair to Fujifilm Superia in the past, because, you know, whenever I was converting these images, I was actually very pleasantly surprised with how well the film stock did. And, you know, the reason why I'm not, like, upset with the photos being ruined is, I don't know, I feel like even though there are those imperfections, you can still see, you know, what the film could have done, you know, like the potential that could have been there had there not been that water damage. In the past, you know, I haven't really loved the results that I've gotten shooting film in, you know, really overcast days. I just feel like the large blanket of light can sometimes throw off some of the colors, and the lack of contrast can make things look a little bit boring. But I really like how Superia rendered all of these scenes. The colors look great. It seems like the film has a lot of dynamic range. The grain isn't really that noticeable, and the film is really sharp. And I know Fujifilm sort of marketed Superia 400 to have that like extra fourth layer of film that helps with artificial lighting. And while this photo isn't the best or the coolest photo in the world. I think it does a good example of showing what that fourth layer does, because as you can see, this is fully under artificial lighting, but it still looks pretty good. So now, leaving Boulder, we're getting back into Lakewood where we were staying, and this is when I took a couple pictures inside of the Airbnb that we were staying at. And as you can see, particularly the mirror photo has a ton of water damage. In my opinion, these photos are just all right. I don't think they're really that cool. I think honestly the most interesting part of these photos is how bad the water damage is. One of my favorite parts of the house was the side where we had this really cool greenhouse and this really, really big cigar tree with an old tree house that probably looked like it was assembled a very, very long time ago. It was like held up by a bunch of these ropes. I think they were just kind of for support so it didn't fall over anymore, probably due to the age of the actual treehouse. But yeah, these photos are just yet another example of why I feel like I didn't appreciate Superia 400 for what it was, because shooting this film stock when the sun is out, not on an overcast day, I think yields the best results that this film is capable of. Certain film stocks and certain film manufacturers have, a certain look about them. With Kodak, it's their warm tones, and with Fujifilm, it's their greens. And I think these photos do a really good job at showing off those Fuji greens and what the film stock is really capable of. With like the warmth of the sun, you get these really beautifully warm images. The greens look great. There's a lot of dynamic range, but it's still contrasty, but you retain information in the darker parts and the brighter parts. And I was actually really surprised at how these images turned out, because in the past I hadn't got the best results from Superia 400, and I think that's kind of the main reason why I opted to stay away from the film stock. And looking back at these images and seeing what it really is capable of, I kind of feel bad that I shunned it for so long. And unfortunately, this is my last roll of Fujifilm Superia 400, and so I might not get another chance to shoot it. If I can find it in a store, I definitely will. I'll definitely pick up some rolls, but at this point, I pretty much only see Fujifilm 400 and maybe Ultramax 400 sold in stores. And I feel like it's pretty common knowledge that those films are almost identical. They're not exactly the same, but I feel like they're 99% the same, and you could shoot them interchangeably and probably notice no difference between the two. And after taking photos around the Airbnb in the morning, we went back to Joe Mama's, which is still hilarious to say. It was this like restaurant that was placed inside of a bar, and the bar was really old and it was really cool. And these are some of my favorite images on the roll, and that's why I say I'm glad that my favorite images were in the very end, because they weren't affected by the water damage. These next few photos are some of my favorite on the roll. As you can see, the lighting was super harsh, and I love the way that Superia 400 rendered the sunlight. This photo in particular is for sure my favorite photo that I took on this roll, and probably one of my favorite film photos that I took on this trip. In total, I shot 4 full rolls of film, 1 roll of Superia, 3 rolls of Fujifilm 400, and then I shot like 75% of another roll of Fujifilm 400. That's currently still in the camera. About a week after this video goes live, my fiance and I are going out of town. We're going on an international trip to London, which we're both really excited for. And I plan on shooting a ton of film while we're there, so I'll probably wait until we get back to bring this roll to the lab. The next few photos were taken in the restaurant, and I also really like how these ones turned out. The one of the pool table I think is a really cool image. Compositionally, I'm not a huge fan of it, but the way that Superia rendered the scene I think is fantastic. I didn't have a tripod, and maybe that played into it, and I just thought it was cool, so I just snapped a quick picture. But if I were to go back, I think it would be cool if the composition was shifted a little bit more to the left. I just feel like the right side of the frame isn't really that interesting, so if the composition was shifted a little bit more to the left, I think it could have been a much cooler image. And the picture of my brother, I don't know, it's a simple image, but I think it's a really cool picture. And again, I really like what Superia did with the overall colors in the image. And for the final image, we went to a mall, and that's where I snapped this picture. This one almost gives me like Cinestill vibes. If you look at the lights, there's like a red halation around them. I get the sense that Superia 400 has very muted colors, with the exception of green and red. Like looking at this image right here, the blues have this really cool hue to them. Same thing with like the brown wall. But then you get those pictures of the cigar tree, and the greens are just out of this world. And you just get these I don't know, these just beautiful reds and these beautiful greens from the film, and it's really cool to see I guess almost like the color latitude that this film produces. Overall, I really like how these images turned out. I think Superia 400 did an amazing job. It is a bit sad that there was water damage on them, but again, it's okay. It is what it is. If I end up finding another roll of Superia, I'll definitely pick it up, but I don't really have high hopes that I'll find that. So this might have been the last roll of Superia I'll ever shoot again. Like I mentioned earlier, I am going on a big trip. I'll be shooting a ton of film with the M2 and a ton of digital with the GFX 50S2. I have a ton of videos planned while we're out in London, so if you're interested in seeing those videos, please consider subscribing to the channel so you know when those videos come out. And yeah, I think I'm going to end the video there. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. If you want to see more of my work, feel free to check out my YouTube channel. I'll also leave my Instagram on the screen right now, as well as my Instagram linked and my website link in the description below if you're interested in checking out that stuff. And yeah, that's where I'm going to end the video. Thank you guys again so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.